How do we let this keep happening? We yet again, as a society, scheduled Halloween on Nick Saban's birthday. When I'm college football commissioner, that doesn't happen. Until then, we just have to deal with these sorts of things. We're jam-packed. We're high atop a construction-filled New York City. It's happening all around us. We're in the heart of it, and we're up here because I did Inside College Football last night. We're going to drive to State College tonight. We'll be there for Ohio State, Penn State this weekend. But in the meantime, what we have to talk about is upsets. I feel rumblings. I feel tremors. I feel a little seismic activity beneath our feet that could be a precursor to yet another volcanic Saturday. We had 1.0 a few weeks ago. We could have Volcanic Saturday 2.0 upon us. So I'll give you the upset alert meter. I've got Ryan Day headed into State College, headed into Beaver Stadium. Even at noon, it's going to be tough to take on James Franklin. And the thing about it is, Stats and Info has reliably informed me someone's going to win that game, but someone's going to lose that game. What is the conversation around that losing coach? Who faces more pressure in that game? Is it Ryan Day? Is it James Franklin? I had a little take the other night, and some people disagreed on that. We got some huge November games coming up. You hear that? You hear Volcanic Saturday almost upon us. We got huge November games coming up, and I am going to tell you how big which of them are and which ones will ultimately determine this thing. Cole Cubelic's on the show tonight, and I already recorded our segment with him, and I've got to say, as segments with Cubelic go, it's about as good as we've done. A lot of meat on the bone with Cubelic tonight. And you know I tell you if it sucked. We've done segments that sucked before, but not tonight. They're watching us in Spokane, Washington, Trussville, Alabama, which I've always called Spokane of East Central Alabama, Arlington, Virginia, Jacksonville, Florida. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you're following on Instagram, @LateKickJosh. We'll do Friday Night Lines from State College tomorrow night, because we somehow got hotels in State College instead of beautiful Altoona. And no disrespect to Altoona, but I'd rather be in State College this time of year. And we'll be on the sidelines Saturday. You will get no better access, maybe even including by watching the Fox broadcast, than I'll give you in that Instagram story. We'll have a lot of good behind-the-scenes stuff. And hey, look, I'll be on campus tomorrow. Going to go over there and lift at Penn State. Penn State, one of the best weight rooms in the country, by the way. If no one else gives them credit, I will. That place is awesome. But that's coming up. As for now, the upset alert concern meter this week is pinging for me on a lot of these games. Ole Miss, Arkansas. I want to start you with that one. I'm going to put a 6.5 on the 1 to 10 scale on the upset alert concern meter here. There is no wiggle room. Whereas maybe a month or two ago, you looked at this game on the schedule and you thought, ooh, Ole Miss, let's see, they'll either be an undefeated team or maybe a one-loss team max, and they're going to go up there to Northwest Arkansas. Maybe at the time you thought Arkansas was going to be out of it and they're dead in the water. Well, neither of those things is true. Ole Miss has already got a couple of losses here. And Arkansas, they really got off the deck last week. Like, they played inspired football against Mississippi State. What does that mean? It doesn't mean much other than they haven't mailed the season in like some teams have this time of year. Good offenses, each one of them, when they're peaking. My potential problem is Ole Miss has not topped 27 points in each of their past 4 games. We don't call that peaking. Arkansas hung over half 100 last week, by the way. Now, here's what gives me confidence that Ole Miss is going to get the job done here, and why I'm only going to make it a 6.5 on the upset alert concern scale. Because I'm looking at the #1 defense in the country in points per game. Ole Miss. Yes. I don't think many people realize that. They've been so stuck on how hot and cold the offense is. Defense has been getting the job done, and Arkansas is 121st in the country in pressure rate allowed. So get to the quarterback, disrupt, do your part offensively, and I think Ole Miss will live here. They will escape with a win, and then it's time to start looking at that Georgia game. Louisville is playing Clemson this weekend. I think based on the JP poll, which has been favorable to Louisville, you may look at this and you may say he's gonna call for the upset here. I'm not. I'm putting a 4 on the upset alert concern meter. This is a schedule dynamics special. You guys remember a couple of weeks ago, we made LSU one of our best bets. I thought they'd beat Ole Miss outright. Some people had disparaging comments towards us when we made that pick. Well, why did I make the pick? You didn't need to know a thing about football to make that pick. You just needed to have a handy-dandy helmet grid schedule in your hand. Same thing here. Don't care if you don't, I don't even care if you know who plays quarterback for Louisville. Here's what you need to know. This is their 7th game in 7 weeks. It's their 3rd road game in the past 4 weeks. Clemson is off a bye. Clemson is at home. And oh, by the way, whereas last year was kind of up and down offensively for Clemson, they're top 10 in a lot of offensive categories right now. It's a massive step up in quality of competition for Clemson. I will grant you that. I think they'll be shot out of a cannon this week. I think Clemson's going to win and cover, by the way. Maybe a little prelude to Friday Night Lines. So I am going to put a 4 on this. Because the thing about it is, I respect Louisville. I'm actually higher on Louisville, I think, than most of the country is. This is a really bad spot for them. Really bad. Next up, here we go. Indiana. Is it the Michigan game, Josh? Nope. Is it the Ohio State week yet? No, it's not. Nope, they're just going to play Michigan State. We cannot talk like that, friends. We cannot talk like that, all due respect to Indiana. We cannot talk like that about the Hoosiers yet. It's just construction. That's all it is. Just bear with it. But I'm not going to talk over it. So, pause. You know, if you ever doubted I'm live, don't doubt it anymore. Curtis Rourke probably back for Indiana this week. Probably. Now, they won without him last week. This is a landmine game. I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about it because I've heard way too much talk about down the road this week with Indiana. I've heard about the Michigan game. I've heard about the Ohio State game. And the thing about it is, Michigan State's lost some recently. Aiden Childs, though, when he's protected, can pop you. And this is not the kind of situation where you can afford to overlook competition. They've played up several weeks in a row, have the Indiana Hoosiers. There is a down week coming. I don't know if it includes a loss. This is unbelievable that this is happening, by the way. I'm just going to pause while we have to listen to construction go on beneath us. Okay, I'm putting an 8 on this. The line is 7.5 on this game. I'm putting an 8 on the upset alert concern scale. I'm not going as far as to call for the outright upset, but you can hear it in my voice. I'm concerned. They outplayed Michigan last week. Like, Michigan State outplayed Michigan everywhere but the scoreboard, that pesky scoreboard at the end of the day. So a much more dangerous team, which leads me to my next game, because I think Iowa State is playing an infinitely more dangerous team than they look on the scoreboard. Iowa State's like a 12.5-point favorite against lowly Texas Tech. Texas Tech has a tailback that is 3rd in college football right now in rush yards per game. And the thing about that is Iowa State is 99th in the country in stopping the run. It profiles as a game very similar to the UCF game a couple of weeks ago. UCF, double-digit underdog against Iowa State, but they come in there and they hang around. They've got the lead until late, and Iowa State needs a comeback to win. I don't know if it's that kind of game, but it's November. You're breathing very rarefied air if you're Iowa State now. I'm putting an 8 on this. And you know how much that kills me, because I am surfing on the Iowa State hype wave. By any means necessary this weekend, please. Pitt is at SMU. You know, JP Poll took a lot of flack this week because I had SMU in the top 20, 21 I think it was, and we did not have Pitt power rated in the top 25. Now, people took that to mean I was disrespecting Pitt. I couldn't care less about respect or disrespect. I was telling you there are more than 25 teams in the country that would be favored over Pitt, and that's all I'm trying to do with a power rating, which I've explained ad nauseum. So, someone who I didn't really take time to reference on the show, came at me and said, it's disrespectful to have SMU above Pitt. Well, no, it's not. And conveniently, they play here. And SMU's favored by 7.5, which implies about a 4.5 gap between them and Pitt on a neutral field. That's the end. I don't care if Pitt wins the game by 50. The JP poll did its job here, having SMU above Pitt. Now, as for the game, yeah, I'm concerned. I know Pitt well enough to know to be concerned here. I've got a 7 on the upset alert concern scale. SMU quarterback questionable. That downgrades them, I think, fairly significantly if he cannot go. But they were -6 in turnovers and still found a way to win last week. A lot of people view that as a negative. I view that as you ran a red light and didn't have to pay the price. I texted Rhett Lashley that, actually. You ran a red light, you didn't have to pay the price. And you know what? He did not disagree, nor could he. I think SMU is going to win this game. but I am not totally confident in it, so I'm going to put a 7 on the upset alert concern scale. This last game I saved for last for a reason. There's no way. I mean, producer Jesse has asked that we include Kentucky, Tennessee, because according to him, the streets want to talk about this game. There's just no way. I'm putting a 1.5 on this. There is no, well, I'm going to say there's about a 1 in 100's way. The line on the game's 15.5. We bet it earlier this week. It's up to 16.5 now. It's one of our best bets of the week. Tennessee has been limited at times offensively this year, even if they are. I'm telling you, Kentucky's dealing with that times 5. So short of multiple turnovers, which there's no way to forecast, that would be the way that Tennessee loses. Short of that happening, there is no way I see a world that Tennessee loses. And I'm looking at their schedule over here. They got Kentucky. They got Mississippi State at home. The next time they leave home will be a game I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, and that's at Georgia. I mean, there's seemingly one giant hurdle left, and that's on the road. They're a one-loss team right now. So even if they lose that Georgia game, anyway, that's not the point of this segment. I'm putting a 1.5 on the upset alert concern scale there. Okay, big news this weekend down the road, based on where I sit in New York right now. Down the road in Bradenton, Florida, you guys got a new Academy Sports and Outdoors opening this weekend. In Bulverde, Texas, that's the San Antonio market. Brand new Academy Sports and Outdoors opening this weekend. You know the drill around here. If you go during a grand opening weekend to Academy Sports and Outdoors and you document that you were there, 5 of you are going to receive chalice of supremacy. That is the plural of chalice. And for those uninformed on what a chalice of supremacy is, just hang around. You'll find out. Academy Sports and Outdoors, your one-stop shop for all the outdoor sporting goods, plus. And they are the presenting partner of this show. That's why we just bring it to you free of charge, and you don't have to sign up for anything. And it would be nice if you subscribe to the channel. But you know what? Candidly, they don't even make you do that. They just broadcast the show free of charge, and we appreciate them for that. Let's move on. Take a little sip of coffee here. Long drive tonight after the show. Got to drive over to State College, which beats flying all over the country, which we've been doing. But nonetheless, we have to stay energized. So we're going to Penn State Saturday for Ohio State versus Penn State, and there's a lot of nervousness. Understandably so. It's a big game. Man, it's got Big Ten championship implications and the playoff deal, but this is just a big, some call it a rivalry game, some get bent out of shape when you call it a rivalry game, but it's a big game in the Big Ten. And big game environment, and I can't wait, and I've been to this game a couple of times, and we'll be there again. This stuff is not for the faint of heart. This stuff is not fair. And by that, I mean someone's going to face a mountain of criticism when they lose this game. So earlier this week, someone asked, well, who has more pressure on them? Which is sometimes a topic I like to bat down. Like, I look at questions like that, and I think there are so many more things to talk about on the field that have nothing to do with this abstract nonsense. But in this case, I think it applies. And if it's low-hanging fruit, then it's low-hanging fruit. But how could you not have watched college football recently and understand what's on the line for the loser of this game? It's a very morose way to go about approaching a game. But I said earlier this week, when someone told me all the pressure's on James Franklin, I said, you're crazy. All the pressure's on Ryan Day. And they disagreed with me because they said, well, Penn State's at home and they've got a perfect season so far, and if they lose, then a lot of their preseason goals could be out the window. Well, you're not wrong, but that's not what you asked me. You asked me who faces more pressure. It's Ryan Day by a mile, by a country mile, as Meemaw would say. But if you don't believe me, let's walk through this. What if James Franklin loses? Competitive game. So let's just say our hypothetical here is 27-24 either way, something like that. All right, no blowout. That's a whole different conversation. Competitive game, Penn State loses. What happens? Here's what happens. Penn State fans are mad. They're upset that they got another shot, maybe the best shot they've had at the dominant brand in the Big Ten, if not the best team this year, in Ohio State, and they didn't get the job done. People will have a few news cycles where they question whether James Franklin will ever win the big one. They will talk about how there are facets of the program that don't measure up to that of Ohio State. Maybe there's not full commitment here. Maybe there's not full buy-in there. Unavoidable. That will all happen. But that's all that will happen. You understand that, right? That's what will happen, because at the end of the day, if Penn State fails to beat Ohio State, all that will have happened is what's already been happening. Now, that doesn't make a Penn State fan happy. If James Franklin's watching the show, he listens to that and he just hits mute. He just throws his laptop against the wall. He doesn't even want to consider that they could lose a game. That's not an option for them. I understand all that, but I'm not them. I'm not him. I'm not amongst the Penn State booster class. I'm not a Penn State alum. So I'm just looking at it through the objective lens of a kid who grew up in West Central Georgia. That's the way it would feel to me. Now, do me a favor, untie the laces, take the shoe off, put it on the other foot. What if Ohio State and Ryan Day lose? It is Armageddon. It is end of the line, if not end of the outright world of Ryan Day / Ohio State for many Buckeye fans. Understand where we would be. We would be in unprecedented territory there. We've seen Ohio State fail to win a national title. Of course we have. It's really hard to win those things. But even when they've missed recently, they've been right there, and then it's Michigan. That's the hurdle they can't get over. Well, Michigan's not that high a hurdle to clear this year. Again, all due respect to the Wolverines, all due respect to that rivalry. Ohio State would be like a 3-touchdown favorite in that game if they played it today, and probably will be by the time they do play it and they get them at home this year. So I'm looking at it, if I am an Ohio State fan, or even if I'm not, and I'm saying the Michigan hurdle's never been lower recently. You got that in the bag, but you already got one loss on the road at Oregon. If you lose this game with a team that was custom built to win a title. I was up there in spring. I sat down with Ryan Day for a long time. There were no apologies made about the idea that we are all in for 2024. They were aggressive in the portal. They didn't go and do the Florida State thing where they totally built the team out of the portal. In fact, I would argue the nucleus of the team's been built the right way. The nucleus of the team was built through high school recruiting. A lot of the guys that returned, in fact, all the guys who returned, were built homegrown. Then you add in a Quinshon Judkins and you add in a Caleb Downs. That's the way you should use the portal. Everything about the way Ohio State put this team together is the way that sustainable winners will put their teams together. So if they lose, having done all that, if they lose the first week of November for the second time and they no longer control their Big Ten destiny, and you've now, believe me, you will have this. You've now got people questioning whether their resume is even good enough to make the playoff. And by the way, even if their resume is good enough, you'd be singing the same tune about them as folks have been about Bama recently. What are we even talking about playoff here? They still got games to go. If Ohio State has already lost 2 times, they're not immune from losing a 3rd time. It's not some gimme that they're going to beat Indiana. I had FanDuel give us the number today. Ohio State's favored by 12.5 at home right now against Indiana. So don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. And then they have the Michigan game. And again, if Ohio State's been vulnerable enough to lose twice in this scenario, who says Michigan couldn't beat them? Like, who says Michigan couldn't victimize that offensive line, no matter where they play? It would be the tipping point that a lot of people who have held out from criticizing Ryan Day would no longer hold out after. I wouldn't be in that boat, but I've gone over this before with you. It takes a lot. I'm the last one to ever bail on coaches usually, unless it's scandal or something like that. I'm the last one to bail. I'd like to think I have a pretty good head on my shoulders about this stuff, but I also, in the very next breath, always tell you, I'm not the one who pays for the season tickets. I'm not the one who pays my dues every year. I'm not the one who eats, sleeps, and breathes that specific team. And I give everything emotionally and financially they ask me to, and I'm not getting the return on my investment. That's not me. If that were me, maybe I'd have the lack of patience that you guys do. But, if Penn State does win this, I tweeted out earlier, what did I tweet? I wanted to put it out there about an hour before the show so that folks could just marinate on it. I said, you never know when the sun may rise on the most important day of your career. What if Saturday morning the sun is rising on the most important day of James Franklin's career? Unbeknownst to us, maybe even unbeknownst to he and his staff. But there could be a tipping point moment. We've waited for it for a long time with Penn State. What if beating Ohio State is no fluke? What if they just outplay them? And they beat them 27-17, 31-13, really emphatically. And they go on a run. And it culminates with playing for the Big Ten championship. And whether they win it or not, they're in the playoff at that point. And maybe Drew Allar's elevated his game, and that offense has found its rhythm, and that running game's clicking down the stretch in November. Defense gets healthy, and it is what Penn State defense has been for a while. And then they reap the recruiting benefit, and they become a whole lot more desirable, a portal destination. And Penn State goes on a little run here that they haven't gone on to this point. They are the hunted rather than the perennial hunter. Understand, all those dominoes could start with Saturdays being knocked over. That's why these games are so big. You never know when the sun rises on the biggest day of your career. However, on the worst days of your career, you usually know when the sun just set on it. And I really think that could be the case for Ryan Day. I don't like dressing games up like this because in the grand scheme of things, it's one game. But I cannot deny the external ramifications that exist around this one. It's unique in the way it's set up because of the fact that they lost. They had the audacity to lose by 1 point to the number one team in the country on the road. And so because you had the audacity to do that, in reality, Ohio State could be the 9th best team in the country this year and go 10-2. Because the 9th best team in the country reasonably should go 10-2 against their schedule because they play 2 top 10 teams on the road. No one wants to hear that. And once people's minds get made up on this, they're made up. But we will be at this game because Quick Trip is fueling the entire whole new Saturday tour this fall. And we were in 2 places last week. We went to Vegas and then we went to Nashville. And this Saturday, just, an old-fashioned one-game special, a Saturday afternoon special there in Happy Valley there at Beaver Stadium. We have been there a few times now. Been there for a whiteout at night, been there for some big noon games, was there for the Michigan game last year, one of the most boring games in the history of organized athletics. So expecting a better show in this one than last year. And we will have, obviously, a really unique vantage point. They always take care of us at Penn State. Love going there. We'll be on the sidelines for this one. Make sure you're following at Late Kick Josh on the old IG channel because there'll be a lot of good stuff in the story there. All right, let's move on. I have got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 5 games in front of me. All right, here's what we're about to do. Shopkeeping. We're doing some big November games. Then I'm going to give you some best bets. I'm adding one to the Ramen Noodle Express. And then I got Cubelic in here for just a wide-ranging conversation. Got some FSU stuff. What did we talk about? We got some LSU stuff. I had Cubelic walk me through what the locker room dynamics were in the best and worst years of his Auburn career because it directly applies to a lot of what's going on around college football right now. But in the meantime, it is October 31st, and we don't play any more big games until November gets here. So November is upon us. November is the longest month in all of sports. For college football especially, it technically is 30 days, 31 days, whatever, but in reality, it feels like it's 9 or 10 weeks long. Because this is where teams like, for instance, Iowa State get, and they're breathing air that they haven't breathed for a long time. Colorado's there as well. Tennessee's back in that kind of category. And you find out whether you have enough gas in the tank to go 14 weeks or you just had enough gas in the tank to go like 9 or 10 weeks. These are the biggest games, I think, on the radar for the month of November. Bama plays LSU next week. Huge game. Many people will call it a playoff elimination game. I'm like 9/10 of the way to calling it that, but you can never say for sure because you don't know what the rest of the country is going to do. You don't know how the rest of the field is going to pan out. But LSU, the last time we saw them, they were getting sliced up by any kind of quarterback run or option game in the second half against A&M, and that is something Alabama does very well. Now, this is not as cut and dry as that. If it were, college football would be easy to figure out and we'd all be rich betting it. But if LSU can't do any better stopping the run, especially the QB run, than they did against A&M, then that's ugly. Bama on the road was a disaster the last time we saw them in that kind of situation because it was at Neyland. How about Kalen DeBoer coming down to the SEC and gets a taste of Neyland at full throat? And I can very well assure you Death Valley at night will be that kind of experience and then some. In his first year at Alabama, he gets all that. And Kalen DeBoer versus Brian Kelly is an interesting little dynamic there as well. But for all the obvious reasons, this game's on the list. That's in week 11, so that's next week. The week after that, Tennessee goes to Georgia. And we got to find out, is this different than 2022? You remember a couple of years ago now, Tennessee gets the win over Alabama in Neyland just like they did a few weeks ago. Now, it was higher scoring because at the time, Heupel had the #1 offense in the country. And they were riding high, and they tore down the goalpost, and they dumped it in the river, and they did a lot of the same stuff that we saw a couple of weeks ago. But then we knew they had that game looming on the road in Athens, and they could not withstand Georgia. They physically were second place that day by a wide margin, and it let Tennessee know how far they still have to go. So we're 2 years later, and they're in the same boat, and I assume that they'll be a one-loss team when they go down there. And think about Georgia will be favored to still be a one-loss team, but this will be after Georgia's already played Florida this weekend, where they're a healthy favorite, and they will have already gone to Ole Miss, where they'll be a smaller favorite, but still a favorite. Is Georgia still a one-loss team? It's no guarantee. Would expect them to be, but there's no guarantee. And so this is like the Bama-LSU game. For all we know, we'll be talking about playoff elimination, although I'm not sure that's the case with Tennessee. And if Georgia's merely a one-loss team, that wouldn't be the case with Georgia. But, dude, this is all these big games Georgia's played. Bama, Texas, the Florida games in Jacksonville, Ole Miss. This is the one they get at home. This is the top 10, top 15 caliber team they get at home. So that one is 2 weeks from now. 3 weeks from now, and who knows where we are by this point, Indiana, thus far undefeated, goes to Ohio State, week 13. We've got to shake the idea of upset-proof teams. I'll tell you, I'm thinking this way with Georgia, Florida this weekend. I think this way with Ohio State, Indiana. Recent history has taught us you got a handful of teams any given year. Normally Georgia's one of them. Normally Bama under Saban was one of them. Normally Ohio State under Ryan Day has been one of them, where there is a certain small group, and they're all in it, that is just immune from these kinds of upsets in November. It will not happen. Now, they may not cover a spread because the spread's so big, but they're not losing the game. They're just too good. They're too fundamentally sound. They're too well coached. They're too deep. They will not let it happen. That may not be the case this year. And if it's not, and it has not been with Ohio State, if it's not, you cannot discount these games. And Indiana's playing the best ball that we've ever seen them play. You can't discount these games. For Ohio State, let's say they go beat Penn State this weekend. God forbid they lose it. If they lose it, this is its own segment. But even if they win this weekend, people will start to think they got over the hump. Now we'll have the Michigan game for fun and then the Big Ten title game. No, you won't. Not yet, not in that order. Look at the schedule. They got Indiana. Indiana's better than Michigan. You need to be focused on Indiana a whole lot more than you need to be focused on Michigan, although I understand why you would think opposite. Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana are still undefeated in conference play. So let's say Ohio State does lose to Penn State this weekend. Well, if Indiana keeps winning and Oregon keeps winning and we end up second to last weekend of the season, we could still be in that weird trajectory where we're on pace to have 3 undefeated Big Ten teams. That could also be in play. Not to mention the whole Ohio State college football playoff resume talk. The week after that is rivalry week. And that means, sure, you got Ohio State and Michigan, you got the Iron Bowl, you got Notre Dame, USC, we have all of these things. South Carolina, Clemson could be a really, really big sneaky game that day. Texas at Texas A&M in week 14. It could be game of the year material. The cheapest tickets there right now are off the charts. Remember a couple of weeks ago, I talked to you about some games of the year. Colin, don't show it to me yet, but in a second, I'm going to show you lines on these games of the year. But I'm going to give you a little sneak preview. This line has dropped significantly. Dare I say precipitously it's dropped, because ever since we talked about it, that thing is shrunk. It is sunk like a stone, almost to net zero. Not quite, but almost. It's a one-night only type of game. What I mean by that is, sure, Texas is in playoff contention. A&M is as well. They're both in SEC championship game contention. But you know what? If you bring your Meemaw to the TV that night, she doesn't need to know any of that. You turn this game on for her, her jaw will be on the ground for one-night only spectacle type reasons. Because Kyle Field will be maybe in a form like most of you have never seen it before. Kyle Field has been waiting for this moment. It is basically the lyrics of In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins laid over a football game. I don't know what more I can say, but I will say this. These teams have challenges before they play that game. Texas has a bye week this week. They play Florida. They go to Arkansas, which was a total nightmare for them last time they went up there. And they got Kentucky. So they got a couple of losable games there. A&M goes to South Carolina this Saturday. That's a very losable game. They got New Mexico State. Ask Auburn about that. And then they go to Auburn before they play Texas. So a couple of tough road spots for Texas A&M. So there's still a long way to go. Like, they got to pull out the weed whacker and get their way through this unscathed to make it maximize its national significance. It doesn't need significance. Like, all due respect to the folks in Billings, Montana, the locals there do not care if you're watching or not. They will hate each other all the same. And same weekend, rivalry weekend, Kansas State goes to Iowa State. This could have all kinds of different ramifications. This was a game played in like half a foot of snow last year. It's unbelievable. This was Iowa State's coming out moment. I think towards the end of the year, Rocco Becht had a really good game. And again, they're playing in a snow globe. And they go in there, and Iowa State had not had a great season, but I thought it was the moment. It was like the Papa Top on 2024 for them. I still think of that game as the first game of 2024 for them. And so this year, they play it in Ames. Who knows what the weather's going to be. Kansas State, they still control their future right now. Iowa State's undefeated. They control their future right now. So there could be so much on the line. Two of the best coaches, I think, in that conference, in Kleiman and Matt Campbell, and I'm really looking forward to that one. I could have talked about Clemson, Virginia Tech. I could have talked about Georgia, Ole Miss. But I want you to think about this, okay? So these games of the year, including the ones that I just mentioned. I hit up FanDuel, as we can do, you know, when you got a partner like FanDuel. I hit up FanDuel and I said, these are the biggest games I think are going to happen in November. Give me some numbers. And so FanDuel, boom, hit us right back. So games of the year for November right now, these numbers exist at FanDuel. Alabama at LSU, what do you think the number is? Alabama's favored. As of this moment, you can bet this number. Bama minus 2.5 at LSU. Tennessee goes to Georgia. A couple of weeks from now, Georgia laying 10.5 against Tennessee as of now. Indiana at Ohio State, that number's all the way down to Buckeyes minus 12.5. This one, though, the Texas versus Texas A&M number, has gone from Texas minus double digits just a few weeks ago to Texas minus 4.5. So I kind of flippantly advised you to take some Texas A&M at plus 10, plus 11 a few weeks ago. Apparently the whole world did, because it's down to Texas minus 4.5 now. And exclusive news here, breaking news, because this game isn't available to be wagered on yet. But according to FanDuel, listen up in the Big 12, if they put the Kansas State at Iowa State number out right now, it would be Cyclones minus 5.5 at home. Games of the year. There you go. Don't say you weren't warned. Speaking of FanDuel, brilliant transition. It's almost like we set it up that way. They are the exclusive odds provider of our show. Big opportunity for you if you're a new sign-up this weekend. Bet $5 on anything. Bet a money line. Bet a huge favorite on the money line. You get $150 back. It's not quite free money. It's as close to free money as you get without having to compromise your integrity, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. There's a QR code on your screen right now. You can use that. You can go to fanduel.com/CFB promotion if you want to do it that way. And that's just a way to let them know we sent you. Got profit boost tokens all over the place this weekend. On any college football game, there's a really big one on Ohio State, Penn State. So a lot of opportunity over there. I know a lot of you are already there, but if you thought about it, just go peruse at your leisure, at your convenience. Ramen Noodle Express time, then I'm going to get Cubelic in here. We have already been on 4 games. So right now, we got on Tennessee earlier in the week, minus 15.5. I still like it at minus 16.5, but we got it at 15.5. TCU plus 2.5. They're playing Baylor. We got Northwestern minus 1.5 against Purdue. Told you Miami was going to cross 21, so we got them at minus 20.5. And I'm going to add South Carolina tonight. South Carolina plus 3.5. I'm really nervous for Texas A&M. The model thinks the wrong team is favored. The model thinks that South Carolina wins this game outright. So we're going to take 3.5 points perceived value there. We're going to take 3.5 with the Gamecocks. And Friday night lines will emanate tomorrow night from State College. Make sure you're following on Instagram at Late Kick Josh. I'll let you guys know earlier in the day what time we're going live, but that will be tomorrow night. All right, I got to the office early today. We're in New York City. There was a beautiful backdrop of the skyline behind me, but the sun was too bright. So instead, I just used a plain white wall as my background. But people don't tune into this for the aesthetics. They tune in for hard-hitting college football, and that's what we're going to try to bring you here, is the conversation earlier today with our buddy, Cole Cubelic.
All right, there he is, Cole Cubelic joining us. I've got a theory / thought. I just want to hit you with it. You've seen Florida State this year, just like I have. It's been a total disaster. It went from the biggest boom to the biggest bust that I think I've ever seen in 1 to 2 year periods in college football, at least in recent memory. So you and I were just talking before we hit record. So I said, hold on, I just shh you. And I said, let's just talk about this on air. Do you think that a situation can get so bad in a season that it reverberates beyond the season? It poisons the well permanently, and it got so bad that you can't hit reset. You can't hit the flush button and just get things back to normal. And could be the case with Norvell. There are a few other instances around the country, but that's the most extreme one. And then the other thing I start to think about is in the modern age of college football, you are more likely to have situations like this where you just strike it rich in the portal one year, and so it goes sky high. And you can't recreate that, and it bottoms out, which leads us to have this kind of conversation. But you said something right before we started talking about, man, if you hit that lottery, people may expect you to hit the lottery every year, which got me to thinking, Mike Norvell, good coach, doesn't have the track record necessarily of a Kirby or a Nick Saban or anything like that. So there were still questions around him up to last year. And then I think people had their questions eased and their minds eased. And maybe that's a little akin to saying, this guy won the lottery. We're going to invite him to business school to speak. And the kids just pepper him with a bunch of questions about what was your strategy and how did you do this? How did you accomplish that? And the guy's like, I won the lottery. That's my strategy. That's my approach. Right. That's my advice. I won the lottery. That makes Norvell sound like a fraud. And I don't want to do that. But I'm saying if it's not him, eventually that will happen a few times where guys hit the lottery. You can go back to Orgeron at LSU. So this is not some new example of a guy that went boom and then bust. But I just wonder if it's more plentiful than that from here moving forward. And then I wonder, like, how is this going to turn out for Mike Norvell? Because you're going to be hard pressed to convince me, as much as I may like the guy, that you can just put something like this in your rearview mirror and just pull the nose right back up and have things be okay 1 year later.
Yeah, it's multi-layered, and it's so real when you talk about hitting the lottery. Like, you can split aces playing blackjack, but there's no guarantee you're getting 2 face cards coming up next. You might get a 2 and a 3. You might get 2 face cards, and then, you're doing great. It's not going to happen on every hand. But then you're going to have the other people, Josh, that I think are saying, well, your coaching acumen should at least keep it from getting this bad. Like, I was talking about Florida State earlier today, 108th in third down defense, 132nd in third down conversions, 81st in penalties, 131st in rush offense, 127th in turnover margin, 112th in sacks allowed, 115th in tackles for loss allowed, 125th of plays more than 20 yards, 106 in rush defense, 131st in total off. Like, that's a lot of 120s and 30s in all of college football. So I still think that people are going to look at this and say, you make $10 million a year, you're a great coach. We should be able to give you Hoover High School's kids, and you can go out there and win 6 or 7 games, not be this, which I think part of that is fair. But part of that, too, is this revolving door of college sports now that not only includes talent and experience, but leadership and guys who understand different systems and guys who come in and have desire and want to prove something, as opposed to guys. I mean, let's be honest here, Josh. There are hanger-oners now in college football. When I played college football, there were 1 or 2 guys on each side of the ball that were your hanger-oners, like your fifth-year seniors that – okay, in an emergency situation, we might need to throw him in at tackle, or four-string quarterback that can be a holder if he has to be, but we're not going to run him. But like, we know that he's kind of just here because he can still be here kind of guy. There's 20-30% of college football teams that are that now because they're making pretty good money, and they're probably making more money than they're going to make in their first jobs when they leave. And they've already got a degree and they're working on another degree and whatever. So that's all tough to manage. But to your other question of, can it get it to the point where it damages things, hinders things down the road? Yes, it can. I've had calls from agents already this year about coaches that you and I would not say were on the hot seat. We're not going to get fired, saying, hey, man, what do you think the situation is there?
Yeah.
Hey, what do you think's going on behind the scenes there? I'm like, why are you calling me? And they're like, well, people are asking questions about this guy. I'm like, get out of here. Like, they're not getting him out of there. Look at a situation like Billy Napier. Do we really think that can be reversed? I mean, honestly, in your gut, do you think that Billy Napier can turn this thing around? I wish he could. I hope he can. But based on everything we've heard and everything people have said, it seems very doubtful that that can be reversed. And that's because of variables. And that's because of what you're referencing, that certain people have gotten to the point that they've said, no more. It's kind of like it's like talking to fans about Peyton Thorne earlier this year. Like, McElroy and I would go back and forth about it, and he'd get really frustrated. He'd say, you saw these interceptions. He was hit when he threw the ball. Like, the ball was tipped. Like, you saw the other decisions. And I said, Greg, first off, welcome to, terrestrial radio. Second off, in situations like this, when people make up their minds, it's over. It's done. So I think that applies to head coaches too, because you and I both know where the money's coming from. You and I both know where the power is stroked in a lot of these places. If that person or 3 out of those 5 people say this ship has sailed, whenever the time comes, we're ready to move on. It might be December. It might be next week. It might be middle of next year. But just know we are moving on, and we'll be ready to give you the rest of what we got then.
I think the other part of what you asked about Napier is, so I've got the fan analyst side of me that'll sit here and say, no, he probably can't turn it around. However, if he had Miami's remaining schedule, maybe he could turn it around because maybe that leads to a winning season. That's that side, okay? Then there's the other side that's way more jaded and calloused to this business, who knows what you just said is accurate. And what he said, for those of you listening who weren't necessarily picking up what he's putting down, is when they went in the tank about a month ago, seems like an eternity ago, when Florida really went in the tank, I started getting calls too. Yes, some of them are from agents. A lot of them are from the biggest money boosters and the people who were most connected to money around Florida. Their mind was made up. Their mind was made up. When you start hearing people speak definitively in our lane, in our avenue, about how a guy's probably done, the search firm's already in motion behind the scenes, it's not necessarily because the AD has texted you. It's because the people who make the decisions for the AD have texted you or called you. And so, I agree with you. I don't know what the mechanisms are around Mike Norvell. I think the same thing about Lincoln Riley. I think about these guys who I think are capable coaches who maybe if you just plucked them from their situation, gave them 2 years off, and gave them a fresh entry at some other place 2 years down the road, probably have success. I just don't know if this far into your tenure, he's 5 years in. Norvell's been there half a decade. I just don't know if you have the equity and the rope to say, all right, I've realized the error of my ways. From this point forward, we'll do it right. They're not going to give you time to rebuild or reinvent yourself when you're making that much money.
Well, how about this? I think I heard you reference it as like the Saban Dabo problem. I used to reference it as the Saban Urban Meyer effect.
Yeah.
Whereas people just think it's going to be that every single year. And as we get further down this path of that not being real outside of Kirby Smart right now, Ryan Day right now, even though he's lost to Michigan, let's be honest, the seasons he's put together have been pretty damn good. And even though they might not be ultimately satisfactory to a certain group of people, 98% of college football would love to have those seasons. Dabo, a little bit of a dip. It hasn't been the same as it was. Who are the guys that are just going to have that sustainability every single year? And as we retrain our brains in a lot of different things with college football, how long is it going to take people to retrain their brains of, you're going to get an undefeated regular season. You're going to get a one-loss regular season. Now maybe a playoff appearance. And there might be a 6 or 7 win season after that, maybe 2 years after that, but it can still bounce back. I go back to Kentucky and Mark Stoops. I can remember year 2 and 3 where people wanted him gone.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
We're audibly saying he needs to go. He can't do this. And then look what he's done. He's become one of the greatest coaches in school history. So there are a lot of folks that aren't going to have that patience. Fan bases aren't going to have that patience. We might need more of it now, because the reality of that elite sustainability not only feels like it's maybe gone, but if it's not gone, it's pulling away pretty fast.
I'm going to tell you the other thing that'll bite Florida State and bite Norvell, independent of what the reality of the situation is there. If Miami goes and wins the ACC, if those people have to sit there and watch them in the college football playoff, knowing they already had the recruiting upper hand on you, Mario can pound his fist all he wants to. He could have whispered that the other day after that game, and it would be reality. I think that turns up the heat a little bit as well, whatever that means in this day and age. All right, so let's go a little bit west, but stay down there on the coast. Thoughts on LSU right now after they just lost? They're up 17-7 midway through third quarter against A&M, and then Marcel Reed comes in, and they have no earthly idea how to stop him. I mean, as late, I bring up the time and point because as late as midway through the third quarter, I'm watching that game thinking LSU is one more play away from breaking this thing open. And then you fast forward, 23 more minutes of game time, and the whole narrative, accurately so, is, boy, LSU kind of got handled at the line of scrimmage. Boy, they didn't have an answer for Marcel Reed. Boy, A&M pulled away in this game. I did not expect myself to be saying that. So LSU went up to Arkansas a couple of weeks ago, did something that candidly I didn't think they were going to do. They outrushed Arkansas. Did not think that was going to happen. But since it happened, I thought to myself, if they have found that, if they've sort of leaned into that literally and figuratively just enough to where Nussmeier doesn't have to drop back and throw it 50 times a game, then maybe I've got a more balanced approach here. Maybe this team's playing just good enough. They get just enough pressure defensively where in a complementary fashion, that's the big wild card team. And there's a part of me that still wants to believe LSU is one of the biggest wild card teams in this whole, outside of the top 8 or so playoff picture. But I've heard you talk about LSU, your thoughts about what they are versus what they could be / should be. And Brian Kelly's there again in the postgame, talking about what they need to be and what they could be and what they should be. And where are you on LSU right now?
The nice to have with LSU is you have guys that can take over a game. Braden Swinson can take over a game. Whit Weeks can take over a game. Kyron Lacey can take over a game. You have those type players. The need to have is what Brian Kelly asked for after the game, more balance. And this is 7-8 weeks into the season. The balance should have been there.
It's November.
Do I believe deep down in my gut that LSU could push people around offensively if they wanted to, if they were given the opportunity to? Yes, I do. I believe that could happen. With that offensive line, even with the running back issues they had early in the season, it feels like you've kind of figured some of those out. Throw in a tight end that's not afraid to get in there and mix it up a little bit. They could be that team. They are not given the opportunity to be that team. Even the Arkansas game, that was 37 rush attempts for 158 yards.
Yeah.
It wasn't 358. So it's 237 is the most they put on the ground this year, and that was against South Alabama. But the scary part is when you go down the attempts, 26, 21, 28, 24, 23 against Texas A&M, you're not going to control games that way when you have the opportunity to. Like, here's a part of it that people don't understand. So you say, oh, you need more balance to run the clock or control the tempo of the game or time of possession or third down efficiencies or give you better third down looks. That's all great. But what people don't think about is specifically when you have a Shamar Turner and a Nick Scorton and guys like that, is that when they are able to dial in on doing one thing on almost every down, your job becomes 10, 20, 30 times harder.
Yeah.
Because the variety in which you are now able to use technique and fundamentals to go beat your man individually continues to be subtracted. So it's just level down, level down, level down. Okay, I can either take a deep set, I can try to jump him, I can take a quick set, or I can try to get an inside stab. All of a sudden your options are done. Or I can, I better anchor here because I feel like it's going to be speed to power. And when you don't, it's speed around the corner, like you're done. So you make a lot of people's lives very difficult. That's just from an offensive line perspective. That doesn't have to do with backs and receivers and how coverage operates and how linebackers can operate, different coverages you can call. I just think you make everybody's job harder, no matter how good the other people are at what they do. And the one thing that you didn't mention with LSU is that the quarterback is going to throw the ball to the team with the other color jersey on. Now, you're either going to be Arkansas and you're going to drop 3 of those, or you're going to be Texas A&M and you're going to catch 3 of those. So wherever you fall into that mix is probably going to determine the outcome of that game, because this has been happening a couple years ago against Georgia in the SEC title game. This happened against Southern Cal. It happened against Nichols. He's going to throw the ball to the other team. Now, how many times and do they catch it? Those are still up for debate. But this is not a once in a blue moon situation now. This is genetic. It's in his DNA. This isn't Jurassic Park. We don't rewire those chromosomes. The turnover genome is there. And you have to find a way to best mitigate that moving forward, or you're going to continue to have similar issues.
All right. So walk me through this. Let's say
And by the way, handing the ball off is probably the number one way to lower the chances of that taking place.
Very few. In fact, I had Stats and Info run this 0 interceptions on handoffs so far this year. In all of
Not a single one?
Not a single one. Yeah. And
I
so
have to go
we'll see
check
how
the tape, but
we'll see how November goes, but not a single one so far. So let's say you're right. So to backtrack for a second, you said you feel in your gut of guts, if LSU really wanted to lean on someone and wanted to impose their will physically on the offensive line, they have it in them to do that, right?
yes.
Okay. So let's say you're right for a second. There's this world where you're wrong, and let's ignore that. Let's say you're right for a second. What keeps people being paid a whole lot of money to coach this game from sitting in a room like I'm in on a Sunday or a Monday and saying, throw everything else out? We know we can do this. We watch our guys in practice every day. We know who we've recruited and we eval them to do this. Why are we not doing this? Let's do this thing. Because some of this stuff's really complex, and incorporating that, putting that into practice in terms of a game script. Yes, I understand you got to get on a grease board and speak Portuguese, but the principle of the matter, how do you not see that? That's right in front of your face.
Honestly, cool shit. I mean, that's it. Like, why do people spend their money on jewelry rather than investing in stocks? Why are Instagram models married and then divorced and then married again and then divorced and then married again? Like, why does somebody have, the perfect girl next door, yet they are determined to go date, the Instagram model?
Yeah, I mean, they're dating Chastity. They're dating Chastity, and Peggy is sitting right there on the porch swing, and she's just been there all along.
Yeah. I mean, you could have had the GMC Sierra, but you chose, the Denali or the Range Rover, or the Range Rover or the Ferrari, and it's going to break down, and the insurance is going to be too high. Like, cool things are distracting. Throwing the football, catching the football, explosive plays down the field are all cool and fun. Handing the ball off is not cool and fun. Not to most people. I think it is. But to most people, that's it. It's the same situation that you have with a lot of, why are some edge defenders great every down? Well, being great every down doesn't involve a lot of cool stuff. You got to set the edge. You got to use your hands. You got to take on blocks. You might have to take on a double team. It's not all this, dip and rip, half a man, try to get to the quarterback, see how fast and edgy I am. That's not all of it. So I just think it's knowing that you're good at something and thinking that thing is really cool and fun and exciting. And yes, it's great for recruiting. And yes, the kids love it. And yes, it can get you points. But they've proven it can get you beat. They've proven it. So it's just, I think sometimes it's, keep in mind too, first-time play caller, former quarterback, some of those things are just ingrained in your brain. That's this is what we have to do. We're getting that coverage. That guy's an alien at receiver. This guy can throw the ball really well. We're going to do that. We're going to do that instead of, one thing that Sark does that I love, he calls them call them and run them. There are certain situations in games or situations with players where he says, we got to do, Cole, we got to call it and run it. Because I asked him about run game before Vanderbilt. He goes, you're right. He said, we need more times in the game where I say inside zone, go. There are no checks. There is no thought process. Maybe you get a green and gold where you can go left or right. So green, right, gold, left. But there is no, we're getting to Z28 smash. We're not getting to, 4 verts. Like we're not, no, run inside zone right here, because we need to set a tone. We need to prove that we can do it. We need to prove to the opposition that we will try to do it. And that is maybe more important than all of it. Proving to someone that how many times do we see teams that are incapable of creating explosive plays, and we say, just throw the daggone ball down the field every now and then? Like, prove to that safety that is screaming down to the line of scrimmage that he might need to pay attention to that outside receiver once every now and then. Like, just a thought in the back of your mind that maybe we're going to sail it down the sideline and that guy might have a chance to catch it. It's the same philosophy, just in reverse. At least make me respect it. And that's the part that I think that for the majority of the season, they've just gotten away from. And you can't win all the time. Even 2019, LSU handed the ball off. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had over 1,000 yards on the ground. Now, he caught the ball, and they did a lot of other stuff, but like, they handed him the ball, because if you're going to play 4 in the box, they were going to run it at you. And by the way, that offensive line, when given the chance, they got pretty good push in the run game.
I'm going somewhere with this. What was the best and worst teams you were on at Auburn record-wise?
I think 3-8 was the worst, and the best was, we probably 2000, won the West in 2000, won the West in 97, won a bowl, lost a bowl, so can't remember those final records.
Okay, but you had good year, bad year, like you experienced both of those things, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the month of November in college football, I think for a lot of these teams, because they're in the whole playoff conversation and mix now, and they haven't been there before, Colorado is a really good example, just to pull one out of the thin air. You get to November and you find yourself saying things like, wow, man, the first 2 months of the season have flown by, and you convince yourself, well, the next month's going to fly by too. Even just watching this game, November feels 10 weeks long to me. November is such a long month for a contending team. You get in rarefied air, and you're dealing with the kind of pressure and attention and foreign territory that you're not familiar with, coaches, administrators, players, like all of that. But also for the teams that aren't in anything, Kentucky, just randomly, you're going to have Kentucky this weekend. When you get to November, you've been on both sides of this coin. I like to think that we live in a world of angels where everyone thinks the right way and they're playing the game for the right reasons. We don't live in that world, of course. And so there are some guys who are fully juiced for November, and there are some guys who are checked out in November. You've been in both camps. What's that like for you individually? What was that like in a locker room, depending on the situation?
Yeah, it's tough, because I was in one too where we had an interim head coach. You can imagine a lot of guys checked out at that point, a lot of other conversations happening. So we were 10-3, 3-8, 5-6, 9-4. So yeah, good, bad, good. And I think now it's going to be a little more difficult, because some of the things that potentially are in front of certain teams are going to keep them going and keep them into it. Other things are going to be pulling at these guys. Like when you and I've had conversations about agents that have told kids not to play in very meaningful games that could have played at different points in time in this season. So now you're going to have guys being asked to there was someone who asked Ollie Gordon the other day, why is he still playing football?
Yeah. Like it was a legit question.
What? Like because you only get so many opportunities to do this. And this is like everything else that goes into this. Like, I know you think my Popeye's chicken commercial is cool, but like, that's why I signed up to do this, is the actual football game, not the other stuff. Like, we lift weights, we run, we train, we go to meetings, we watch film to play the games. So unfortunately, there's a lot of folks that are going to find other reasons not to play games. And I think this is going to be on the coaches to find different ways to motivate. I think you're going to look at some new age coaches too, Josh, that are going to say, we're not fighting this anymore. We're just going to go get the guys that want to play. And I'm not talking about I'm not talking about Ohio State and Alabama and Tennessee. Though I'm not talking about Oregon right now, but the teams that might make a bowl game, might not make a bowl game, maybe have a chance to get to like 9 wins, and that would be a really good year. They're just going to probably start saying, listen, if this is a debate, just go home. Like, just leave. We'll get this guy in. We'll get him ready for next year. We'll let him play. He'll be happy, the whole deal. And that's going to be tough, because some of those guys are going to be a bit of a liability in their positions. Some of those guys might not be able to make as many plays, but the mentality, I think, is what you want to keep. It's like Shane Beamer has told us about the guys who want to redshirt in the middle of the year and go transfer after the year. He says, you can use the facilities, you can use the academic space, you can do whatever you want, but not during the hours in which my team is here.
Yep.
Like, you will not be around my football team anymore, because he doesn't want those conversations happening in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other coaches, Lane has said he'll let guys practice. Lincoln has said he'll let guys practice. The first thing that comes to my brain is that guy recruiting other players to come with them wherever they're going to go next? And like, why are you letting them hang around? I don't care about a couple scout team reps. I'll get that from, Billy Ballboy. It's whatever. Who cares? So I think the mentality is going to be interesting to watch, because you and I are both thinking the same thing, is why you brought this up. There are 10 to 15 teams out there that when they lose their next game, we are dying to know how that thing looks.
Yep.
The very next week. I mean, I'm to the point where I think we're going to be literally having COVID conversations of, can they put a roster together to go play a game? I mean, I just think that's where we're going to be with some of these squads, and the coaches are going to have to find ways to motivate. The coaches are going to have to find either internal goals or smaller goals or single game goals to try to get guys out there and want to go play and play hard. But, November for us was, number one, it was Georgia and Alabama. So that's what we knew that was. We had divisions, this is one of the reasons that I do think getting away from divisions were bad. We always had that to continue to try and play for. So we didn't have to be one of the top 2 teams in the league. We had to go win our division. When we beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa, Arkansas lost that day, so we clinched the division. So that wasn't necessarily, we didn't control that per se. We had to have some help, but it happened, and that gave us we didn't need motivation to go play Alabama, but those things were still out there. So that meant that they were out there the first weekend of November, the second, third, fourth, all the way through. So it's going to be a little more difficult. I imagine now you'll start hearing about coaches having some conversations of, hey, that 9 spot, that 10 spot, it's there, it's possible, it's feasible. Let's try to make a run for that. So, and then some of the other bowl eligibility, I don't know how much you can motivate that for kids anymore, really. I don't know if they get super excited about a bowl game or postseason. I think at certain places, yes, but there's going to be a lot of places where I think that's going to be a tough sell.
Look, I don't want to say this, but I'll say it because it's the way I feel. I've given up on hoping that guys remain bought in for bowl season. I've just given up on that. I'm wanting you to stay bought in for the regular season, at least. Like, let's hang on to that. But to hang on to it, you talk about coaches making sure that they use methodology to keep guys motivated. Well, there's one very, very easy solution to that. If you're going down the revenue sharing route, you just have to build contingencies into that framework. You have to incentivize that framework to where I've got a $70,000, $100,000 carrot per year dangled in front of your face, but you're not touching it until you complete the season. Unless you're hurt, you better complete this season. And to go back to something else you talked about, the Beamer approach, for example, of you can still use the facilities. You can use South Carolina. We feel like we owe you that much, but you're not going to be around the team. You're going to have to do it off hours.
Right.
When I go to these places, normally I'll work out at a place on Friday.
We know you posted.
And hold on. Oh, my head is just so you'll see them in there. You'll see guys in there who are on the roster and who, as far as the fan base is concerned, are still just as much a part of the team as anyone else. And they're working out on their own in there. They're not injured. They're just working out on their own. You go talk to the strength coach. What's going on there? He's kind of been jettisoned from the team. Like, he can still use it, but he's not really with the team. Happens all over the place. So yeah, that's a real thing, man. So
these nice, like 150,000 square foot weight rooms, it's like softball team, Josh, extra guys.
Yeah, that's basically. Yeah. And then what you want to avoid is the volleyball team, because the volleyball team will humble you. The volleyball team, as a full-blooded, like American male who feels fairly confident about oneself, you start to question yourself a little bit when the volleyball team walks in there and every one of them's bigger than you, and you don't even hang around to see if they can outlift you because you're already intimidated by the size. It can be a tough scene.
Yeah, some of us don't have that problem when they walk in.
People saw the picture last week. People saw the picture. And by the way, how about that? How about finally agreeing, and there was no money exchange. You just agreed to take a picture. just like that,
I
right?
believe I actually asked for said photograph, but that's okay. We
Right
don't
there
we
in
don't have to
front of
say
me.
that if we don't want to.
Hey, do you prefer the sideline or the booth more when you're calling a game?
I will tell you what I've told people who I work for when they've asked me that questions, and I just want to be on the best game possible.
So
I
you,
love being on the sideline because that's as close as I'll ever get to playing again. And
yeah.
it's to see it, to feel it, to hear it, to be down there. There are things I'm going to see there that I'm never going to see up top, but you can completely reverse that. And Lane it's funny because Lane, like during timeouts, has asked me this. He's like, how do you watch games from down here, man? Like this just drives me crazy because you don't have that all 22 view or that end zone tight shot that you want to see so desperately of. I think I saw that, but did that linebacker play over the top? Like, did that safety really come down and bite on the play action? That's why they scored. And you can't really see that. So there is a give and take with both. Like, I love talking to the coaches. I love interviewing coaches. It's something that I never knew that I would have to do. And now I actually love doing it. It's an awesome challenge because every coach is different. But being in the booth and being able to describe things as you see them is something that's also, it's tough to beat, man, because it's like, I feel like I see the game pretty different than a lot of other people. And so I like to talk about the way that I see it, which is not the normal way that a lot of people discuss.
All right. For more information on how you see the game, Cube Show, tell people about it.
One. Yeah, it's a podcast college football show that we do. And I actually do it. It's on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, but Cube Show, CUBE show is where it is. You should subscribe to that. It'd be great.
Brought to you by Wickles Pickles, as always.
Oh, Wickles Pickles, Blue Delta Jeans. Yeah, we got all of it going. The Better Business Bureau of Alabama is on board.
That's like the Crane Works. That's like my Crane Works. Wickles Pickles brings Cole Cubelic to you every week, courtesy of, just fill in the blank. All right, man, I've got to get out of here. You'll be at Kentucky, Tennessee Saturday. I'll be at Ohio State, Penn State. And then we'll probably just hate text each other that night because
Have you picked the winner of that game?
Yeah, I went Ohio State. If there are so many things that if they lose, I'm going to have to be talking about next week that are just going to be totally toxic, that it's past the point of no return. I think to myself, I think Ohio State's going to win because they can't lose. Because if they lose, then they're probably out of the Big Ten playoff or conference picture. And then Ryan Day's got 2 losses on his ledger already in a year where Michigan's down. Like the only thing they haven't been able to overcome is not necessarily a huge obstacle this year. And then it's Oregon and Penn State that get in your way. And this roster was custom built. This thing was tailor made to make a run at a national title. I think you know where that goes.
Yeah, but do the kids view it that way? Like, you can't make guys go out there and play extra because your job might be on the line.
I also think they're good enough to win the game. I wouldn't say this if I didn't think they were good enough to win the game.
They're good enough to win every game, but I'm going to tell you this. That Ohio State film last week,
I watched it,
was the most concerning film on a team that I thought was really good in a very long time. And it was a lot more than the left tackle situation. I'll just say that. I think the offensive identity has a little bit of an issue. Some of the effort on defense was concerning. And it was a lot. So
all right. I feel great about my pick. I will talk to you next week, sir, and we will be back here Sunday night. It's not quite election night yet, so same time, 8 Eastern, 7 Central. For Cubelic, from myself, for producer Jesse, for director Colin, have yourselves a great weekend. Enjoy the games, take care, and God bless.